Now, Mary, let's move the conversation to what companies could do with our information. You've spoken to us before about the RICA process and how we have to, by law, give our personal information to telecommunication companies. What is the concern about what the telecommunication company is doing with our information?
Well, I think that I think I'm not really the person to speak in detail about kind of the effect on consumers and how their information gets handed over to scamsters and 699 rand.
But we've all gotten those SMSs.
We are all billionaires.
I just bought
receiving those emails.
The Spanish lottery this morning without ever having entered it. But
Lucky you.
Look, in terms of RICA, I think one of the things that really sucks about RICA is that it creates this very long time frame whereby your telecommunications provider has to keep your information. In fact, even if they were the most glorious heroes protecting the rights of their consumers' privacy, they would still be required by law to hold on to it for literally years. The kind of your metadata and when you made calls and who you made them to and whatever. And that's really concerning. I think that people do have a right to be forgotten and they have a right not to have that information sitting around. But in terms of I kind of want to shift the conversation to one side, which is to look at the role. We've spoken about state surveillance and how terrible it is, and I obviously agree with that. But private sector surveillance is a connected problem that people aren't really talking about. And an example would be in South Africa, there's a private company called Vaztec, which is found to have sold mass surveillance systems to Libya. And the Libyan government used it to spy on millions and millions of Libyan citizens at a time when the Gaddafi regime was under threat from from kind of being overthrown. And so this is a private company, South African company, that has effectively enabled a human rights abusing regime to abuse, to invade people's privacy on a mass scale. And in fact, it's been found by Privacy International, which is an international NGO, it's been found that the South African government actually funded Vaztec in developing its software. And there's been very little pressure applied to Vaztec or to the South African government to explain this relationship. How is it that, firstly, a private company can be seen to be aiding and abetting a human rights abusing regime? And how is it that the South African government, in turn, has been aiding through funding the company itself?
Now, Mokulani, your organization, and Murray's yours too, is all about open access to information and transparency. But of course, there is a responsibility on a user, a citizen, to protect our information and to keep our information as private as we possibly can. So how do we go about protecting ourselves?
What you put online remains online forever. And I think we need to be aware of what happens when we put our personal data online and not volunteer information as much as we do currently. The stuff that we put on Facebook, on Twitter, on all these social networks is a big concern for me because it will get used. It always worries me whenever I'm on a Facebook page and I'm typing a message to someone about meeting a student from a university abroad. Next thing you see is a little advert on the side about degrees from Manchester University or whatever university it is. That's a concern. It says somebody is watching what I'm doing online. So what you do online is really public, and you need to be aware of it, and you need to take the necessary action to ensure that you don't put stuff out there that will compromise your safety, your well-being.
I think that Mokulani is right, is that unfortunately we have to realize that these are not safe spaces, or not totally safe spaces. And there are things that people can do, tools that one can use, which I'm not the right person to speak to, but encryption and certain software has got better privacy policies than others. But there is also a need to recognize that there should be protection built into these systems, and that the fact that, I think that citizens should have a reasonable expectation that when you go online, because it's the 21st century, the majority of our lives have to be plugged into the network in one way or another, through our work or through our education or whatever. And there does need to be reform so that those systems are built to be safe and built to respect users' privacy and users' rights. And that hasn't happened yet. So there's a need for citizens to start putting that on the agenda, saying both to the technology companies, to the service providers, and to the people passing the laws that this is something this is a non-negotiable.
It goes back to the active citizenship that you were speaking about earlier. Actually, we need to realize that telecommunication companies and governments are not going to change this out of the goodness of their hearts. It's up to us to put pressure on them. Julie, take us home. What's been said on social media?
We've got some final comments here which I think bring up some of these issues we've been talking about. Sheldine Kingston on Facebook says, if you've got nothing to hide, no problem. I'd welcome criminals being caught, but of course the authorities should also be open to scrutiny. Rosalia Mosca says, also on Facebook, most definitely not to surveillance. Besides, a person's privacy is no longer respected these days. So many companies and institutions already have access to one's personal details. What more do they want? And Mafro Feki Molefe said, in public for safety, yes, but then I should also be privy to what they do.
And I think that's a very fair point too. We're so interested to find out what you think about this topic. Let us know by following us on Twitter and Facebook. You can subscribe to our YouTube channel. And did you know that you can find News 24 Live on Instagram? It's at News 24 Live. You can tag us in any topic that you think is relevant to this discussion.